Hey guys, my name is Ethan. I am an NFL draft analyst, and I'm just gonna cut to the chase. I am starting a new series about NFL team propensities through the draft. I have experience. I actually did a long-term project on the Patriots last year, looked at their propensities, was able to project 7 out of the 12 Patriot selections. I projected 7 players who I knew they would target just by looking at the way that they look at things and the way that they analyze their players. And all the players, no matter where they were, fell under my strati for how I was looking at the Patriots overall in terms of quarterback being 5'10, running a certain three cone time, college location, that kind of stuff. So, going to try to make this short, but we're going to be doing a series every single team, 32 teams, 32 days. It's going to be really cool. Starting tonight with Carolina. And Carolina, of course, first overall pick, they have a really interesting dynamic in that they really have two large cooks in the kitchen of their Marty Hurney and Jerry Richardson. Marty Hurney has a lot of control over the draft room, and Jerry Richardson is actually one of the 3 owners right now, along with Robert Kraft and Jerry Jones, who's really sort of a driving force against the players in terms of getting the strike figured out. So I definitely think that it's interesting how that war room dynamic works. They draft weighted BPA, which means that they will draft the best player on their board if he fills some sort of need on the team. Probably. They're not going to just draft a player because of a certain need, basically, is what I'm trying to say. I mean, look at a guy like Jonathan Stewart. He went a little bit higher than people thought he did, but he filled something for them, and they felt like he was too good to pass up on. And he was a compliment for D'Angelo Williams, so that was what they're sort of going for there. So we'll look quick. First round pick for the Carolina Panthers. I have it down to 7 people. Some of them a little bit more wishy-washy than others. Some of them are just not going to be the picks, but they're worth to keep in mind, bear watching, just as sort of a segue into future things I'm going to talk about in future videos. So my 7 are Cam Newton, Nick Fairley, Daquan Bowers, Patrick Peterson, Marcel Darius, Robert Quinn, and Von Miller. Von Miller, the reason why I'm talking about him is because he is sort of emblematic, something important to think about, which is college pipeline statuses. And Texas A&M and Carolina are tight. And Carolina takes a lot of former Aggies. And even though I don't think they're going to take Miller, I definitely think that he is someone to keep an eye on because if they decide to trade down, which I don't think they'll be able to do, he would be someone to look for. Robert Quinn, local guy. They've probably seen him play more than any other team because he didn't play at all this year. He probably won't be the pick, but definitely still, you need to think about that. So narrows down to 5 basically, and I also don't think Patrick Peterson is going to be the pick because if you look at how Carolina forms their secondary, they like to kick bigger cornerbacks inside safety. You look at Sherrod Martin, former cornerback, and Charles Godfrey, former cornerback. So they're actually both former cornerbacks who were kicked inside. They'd probably want to do the same thing to Peterson, who at this point in his career has stated repeatedly he wants to be a cornerback. I don't think that'll go over really well. So, plus it's not really a need for them. Martin and Godfrey are a good young duo, so I don't think Peterson's going to be the pick. I don't think they would keep him outside at cornerback. At least that wouldn't be the first thought in their mind. It might change a bit with a new scheme coming in, but even with McDermott, who used to be in Philly, Macho Harris started most of the season, and he was a cornerback inside to safety. So I don't think it'll matter that much. I still think there are bigger needs for them, that they're going to see better players comparatively in that area than Peterson, so I don't think it's going to be the pick at this point. So we bring it down to Newton, Fairley, Bowers, and Darius. And if you look at Darius and Fairley, you see where some teams sort of run counter to conventional wisdom. Fairley was considered to have a bit of a disappointing combine. He weighed in at 290. And Darius weighed in at 320. So most cases you'd be like, yeah, I'm taking the 320 guy. But if you look at the new scheme that Carolina's running, they like the smaller defensive tackles. This is the defensive coordinator who was on the team who took Mike Patterson in the first round, who took Broderick Bunkley in the first round, who took Trevor Laws in the second round. They like smaller guys at that position. And they like guys who can penetrate. And I don't think that is Marcel Darius for them. I don't think he's going to be picked first overall. Not that that's much of a stretch to say, but even just looking at the overall schematic, it's just not going to work out. Fairley is a higher probability than Darius. So that brings us down to Fairley, Bowers, and Newton. Fairley, we've already talked about how he could be great. Bowers, big defensive end. They took one a little while ago. I think his name was Julius something, and he turned out to be pretty good. And we sometimes see teams sort of revert back to past strategy when they're trying to make an important pick. And the Panthers are really good at hitting on first round picks. They have taken guys like John Beeson and D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart even in the first round in the past, and they have a really good track record of hitting on those kind of guys. So definitely take a similar guy in Bowers. But at this point, I still think that Cam Newton's a guy. The allure of a quarterback, especially a guy with all the potential that Newton has, is probably a little bit too much for Carolina. I definitely think they want him to have good interviews. They want him to have good workouts. But tentatively for now, I would say that I'd have Newton as the prohibitive favorite at that position. Because, I mean, the quarterback, the allure might be a little bit too much for them. I feel bad for Jimmy Clausen. Don't think it was as bad as people said he was. But I'd probably order it Newton, then Bowers, then Fairley. In that order. In terms of who they're going to pick first overall. So, second round, third round area. Of course, Carolina trade their second round pick because they love pushing picks forward into next year. They love getting rid of those guys. And I think that a guy who they could look at if he slips is Drake Nevis, D-tackle LSU. Smaller defensive tackle, could get lost in the shuffle with a really talented class. And in the past, when the Panthers have traded up, Everett Brown, guy who had a lot of hype coming in and slipped. Armani Edwards, projectable guy. I think that Nevis fits that mold. It's a perfect fit for McDermott's defense. And McDermott's going to make a strong push for him, and I think he'll be high on their board too. So we'll see what happens there. But that would be a guy to look out for in that second, third round range. If he slips a little bit too far, Carolina jump up and snatch him. Later in the draft, Carolina does need defensive tackles, so guys like John Graves of Virginia Tech could be interesting. I would definitely limit your picks later in the draft to Southern schools. They could take Northern guys, but the probability is a lot higher they're going to take Southern guys, just from the way they've drafted in the past. South Carolina, they could take some guys from there. They could take some guys from Georgia. Torrey Gurley would be an interesting guy from South Carolina. Big receiver. He is strong, sturdy guy. He could be an interesting complement across from David Geddes and Brandon LaFell, I guess. I'm not a huge fan of LaFell, but I think that Gurley could be an interesting other option there, especially since when you have a rookie quarterback coming in, you're going to need to help him along, help him progress, help him sort of get better incrementally. And Gurley, he can stretch the field, but he's also a big target to go short, along with newly signed Jeremy Shockey. So I think that he could be an interesting pick later in the draft. Chris Culliver has definitely risen up boards. Great combine. I think he might be a little bit too pricey for them now. But before now, I would have said that he would be someone to look at if they wanted more depth behind Martin and Godfrey. Clinton Bowling, offensive guard at Georgia. Interesting guy. Mahler. He is the kind of guy who can come in right away, can help out that team, especially an offensive line that absolutely pulverized Jimmy Clausen because they couldn't block a thing. They were worse than Pittsburgh's offensive line toward the end of the season. Pittsburgh's offensive line was horrible at the end of the season. So they could definitely use him. I would have said tight end, but now they have Shockey, so I think they're good there. Running back, I guess I could take a depth guy late in the draft, maybe if like Bilal Powell's in the 5th round or something like that. Slips. But I sort of like Stewart and Goodson as a tandem. Goodson, of course, Texas A&M guy, Pipeline School. Something to think about. Yeah, and defensively, I mean, they're a funny team because they're really almost there defensively. They have 3 great linebackers now because Davis got injured last year. Beeson was playing out of position and still played really well. So now you got Beeson, Connor, and Davis. That's as good a linebacking core as there is in the NFL. So they have the middle of the defense sort of solidified. I think that they're really a defensive tackle away from being great. And a guy like Nevis, along with Newton, might be a little bit better for them than taking a guy like Nick Fairley early in the draft and then maybe taking someone at a different position later. So we'll see what happens. I think definitely that Carolina's going to be interesting to watch. And there are definitely some certain differences to keep in mind. If you have any questions about things that you didn't hear in the video, You can always tweet me and I will answer everything. I'm really good about that. Or leave a comment on this Facebook. Spread this video around. Tomorrow we're doing the Broncos. Tell all your friends. And I really hope this starts something really big. So thanks for listening to this. And it's just over 10 minutes, so I'm going to end this now. And see you later, guys. Bye.